Well, welcome to Real People, Real Voices. I'm James Jackson, your host.
And I'm Pastor Wayne Moore, your co-host.
Always a pleasure to host with you.
James, you look good today.
Thank you. Almost as good as you.
Oh, here we go, here we go, here we go. Glad to be with you today.
Likewise. It's going to be a great show on today.
It is. We have the Cape Crusader with us today. And he's going to be giving us some information, and we're here to congratulate him.
Yeah. Reverend Charles Harrison.
Right.
And the 10 Point Coalition, he's president. But certainly a lot of great things going on with the coalition.
Right. I'm hearing, and we're going to find out more today.
Yeah. And we want you to stay with us right here on WHMB TV 40. And also, please go to YouTube and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can watch other shows, and once this one's over, you can also go back and watch it. Also, go to our Facebook page and like us on Facebook. We would love to hear how this show has been a blessing to you.
And don't forget our sponsor for Real People, Real Voices, Lee and Fairman, attorneys at law.
And there's a lot of great things that they're doing for our community.
Yes, yes, they're doing a lot of great things, and we ought to be grateful that we have a law firm like this in our city.
And that's Lee and Fairman. So look them up. When you have some problems, they'll be sure to help you. We're excited about what's going on in our city with regard to the peace initiatives that have been taking place.
Yes, yes.
And the 10 Point Coalition has been doing that since back in the 90s.
Yeah, they're still at it.
Yeah.
And we're grateful to report that some great things are happening with them nationally.
Yeah.
So we're going to see what Dr. Harrison has for us today.
All right, so stay with us. Grab a cup of coffee or some sparkling water. We're going to have a great time today. We'll be back after this. Well, welcome back to Real People, Real Voices. I'm your host, James Jackson.
I'm your co-host, Pastor Wayne Moore.
And our guest today is Reverend Charles Harrison, senior pastor of the Barnes United Methodist Church in Indianapolis and president of the 10 Point Coalition.
Well, thank you, Pastor Moore and Pastor Jackson, for having me on the show today.
Happy to have you.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
So I want to get right into it so we can maximize our time. The 10 Point Coalition has done some wonderful work over the years. Kind of share with our viewers what it is that 10 Point does.
Well, 10 Point is a faith-based organization made up of local churches, primarily on the west side of Indianapolis. And we formed in 1999 in response to the violence that was taking place primarily in the United Northwest area. Our focus is to really address the issue of urban youth gun violence that impacts youth ages 14 to 24. That age group is disproportionately impacted by gun violence across the country, and we're losing about 14 a day. So when you look across the country, we're losing about 14 a day in that age bracket. And in Indianapolis in the late 90s, that age group was really being impacted. So that's why we decided to focus on that age group, 14 to 24. And our goal is two goals primarily. One, how do we redirect their lives and put them on a pathway of success? So the goal is to help them address, some of the issues that is leading them to a life of crime and violence, and to restore hope where there's hopelessness. Mm-hmm. And the second point that we try to really address is to provide them job opportunities. So if you're going to ask people to put down the gun and stop selling drugs or being involved in some kind of criminal activity, you have to have an alternative for them. So the job piece is key, particularly for at-risk youth who may have some kind of criminal record, and then ex-offenders who have served time in prison. They come out, and because of the fact that they have, that felony against them, many of them struggle to get good employment. So we try to be an advocate for them with businesses so that we can get them employment, to give them an option other than selling drugs or being involved in some kind of criminal activity that will lead them either back to prison or the grave.
Mm-hmm. And of course, over the years that you have been doing this, Being a lead pastor, certainly you care about people, but what is the passion that drives you to keep going year after year, week after week, even amidst all of the homicides that we're even seeing in this city?
Well, it's been, my family history. I had a brother. I was 14 years old at the time. I had an older brother that was 21 that was killed by gun violence in Louisville, Kentucky. And I will never forget that night, when the phone call came in to my parents and the scream I heard from my dad, and my dad falling on his knees, my mother, crying, and then the family had to go and identify my brother, and that was difficult. But what really, drove me to be really, really passionate about this, I remember the night of my brother's funeral when the individuals that the streets said had killed my brother showed up to the wake and embraced my parents, and my parents started crying, and they started crying with my parents, and it just made me angry, just really made me angry, because I knew based on the streets those were the individuals that killed my brother. And what has, drove me over the years, I don't want any family to have to experience what my family had to experience, when my brother was killed. And at the time, my brother had a son that was only 6 months old. So my brother's son, Jawan, 20-something years later, ended up dying the same way my brother did by gun violence. Yeah, the same way. Brother was 21, Jawan was 23 when he was killed, the same way his father was. And that's been the drive and the passion that I've had, to try to keep other families from going through, what I went through in my family, what we went through. And then I've had other cousins killed too. So, I know what it feels like, to be on that side where you have a loved one who's been killed by gun violence.
I can attest to that. I had a 16-year-old nephew, was killed in one of the high crime areas of our city, 42nd and Post Road area.
Yes.
Very high crime area. Was killed in an apartment there. 16 years old, had his whole life in front of him. And all of a sudden, bam, it happens. And when the news hits the house or the family, it is tremendously, I can attest to that, devastating. Devastating. And then what we have to do, if things are not in place, makes it more devastating.
That's true.
And that's what families are experiencing today.
Yes.
It's not only the loss of a child or a young adult, but what happens after that loss occurs. Many of them are not in a position to grieve comfortably, if it makes any sense in that area.
And there are several areas of town in Indianapolis that 10 Point's been working in, and you all have seen measurable results. Butler, Tarkington area, some other areas. What are you all doing in those areas that would, if we could take that same model and put it in some of the other, what they call, 46218 is a promise zone. Some of the other areas were called hot zones. The names have changed, but the issues are still the same. How can we move what you do in Butler, Tarkington, those areas to some of those areas?
Well, the first thing we did in Butler, Tarkington, and when we were called into that neighborhood was experiencing a gang war. There were two gangs, one from 71st and Michigan Road, and the other was in Butler, Tarkington. A fight had erupted in August at the State Fair. Both groups got into, a fight there at the fair. It escalated. It escalated then to gun violence.
Into neighborhoods.
Yeah, about 5 people ended up being killed. 4 in Butler, Tarkington, 1 around the 71st and Michigan Road. So when we got in, the first thing we did was we helped mobilize the neighborhood, and that is key. You have to get the neighborhood mobilized around the issue of crime and violence. So we got police, the neighborhood association, residents, we got the business community, we got coaches who were involved in coaching youth sports, involved in it. And we put together a plan to address what the residents believe were the root causes of the violence in Butler Tarkington. Number two, we put boots on the ground. We took OGs, original gangsters, former drug dealers, former gang members who were from the neighborhood. So we didn't bring people in from another area. We took people in that neighborhood who knew all of the players, and they started patrolling the streets, engaging those who were most likely to be the victims and the perpetrators of violent crimes and the drug dealers, because we had to get their buy-in, and that was key. Number three,
And before you go to number
Okay.
three, Reverend Harrison, we got to take a break.
Okay.
But two powerful components. That third component, I'm sure, is going to be as equally important and powerful. And he's going to talk more about that when we come back after this. Welcome back to Real People, Real Voices. I'm your host, James Jackson.
I'm your co-host, Pastor Wayne Moore.
And Dr. Moore, we've been enjoying what Pastor Reverend Harrison has been sharing with
Yes,
us
yes.
about the 10-Point Coalition and the Peacekeeping Initiative.
Yeah, and the engagements.
And the engagements. And if you could summarize step 1 and 2, and just before the break, we were going into step 3.
Well, step one was mobilizing the neighborhood around the issue of curbing violence. Step two was putting boots on the ground, residents from the neighborhood to patrol that area, of town where they live in. And then step number 3 was really key. We happened to be walking through the neighborhood one day, and one of the businesses approached us and wanted to know what they could do. How could they be helpful? And one of the businesses, Reese Welding, got involved, and they said they would be willing to give people a second chance. So, we were really excited about that. They're gonna give people a second chance. So we immediately started referring, ex-offenders and at-risk youth to Reese Welding. They taught them how to weld be welders at $14 an hour.
Which is a great job.
Which is a great job, And once...
And a great profession.
Yeah, great profession.
Yeah.
And once they received their, card, then they went from $14 an hour
30.
to as much as $45 an hour.
Okay.
Yes. So we referred over 80 individuals to that company.
At the end of the day.
At the end of the day.
How many did you have come through that program?
We had about 80 go through it. 40 stayed, about 45 stayed in the program. We got other jobs who felt like that was a little too hard for them to do, so we referred them to other employers. But that was really key. That was really key because they started then spreading the word to other, individuals on the streets who were out there involved in criminal activity, and then they started recruiting people for us. And we started getting them jobs, and that really made a world of difference. So people ask, how'd you do it so quickly? Well, when you're getting a lot of ex-offenders and drug dealers who are advocates for you in their neighborhood, in their world, it allowed us to create an atmosphere of peace in those neighborhoods pretty quickly.
Yeah,
Good.
which is so important.
Yeah, jobs are important. We can say whatever you want to say about the crime and the elements that are going on in our community, but if people don't have work, that is what's going to exist. I don't care what area of central Indianapolis that you're in, and possibly Indiana altogether. Jobs are important to people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Reverend Harrison, certainly what you all have been doing has not gone unnoticed. The local FBI in the city of Indianapolis awarded 10-Point the Community Service Award. And you may be able to give us more specifics on what those awards actually were named. But you returned from Washington, D.C. about a week or so ago. Director Comey also bestowed a prestigious award for community service on 10-Point. So tell us about those awards and what was the feeling of being able to get those. Although we do what we do because it's the right thing to do,
Yes,
yes.
but it's also good to be recognized.
Well, we received last week what is called the FBI Directors Community Leadership Award. So every FBI headquarters throughout the United States will award a group or individual that leadership award. We received it this year for the work that we did in Butler, Tarkington, and Crown Hill in particular. Both of those neighborhoods remarkably went a whole year without any homicide. You know, and our goal was just to try to reduce youth homicides, but those two neighborhoods went a year without a homicide. Crown Hill particularly was impressive because in 2013, it was ranked the 17th most dangerous neighborhood in the country. And the year before, they had experienced 7 homicides, so they went a whole year without any homicides. And that was pretty remarkable. And then the third neighborhood was the United Northwest area that went 2 years without a juvenile homicide between the ages of 14 and 24. So it was quite an honor for the organization and for me to go there in behalf of all of our volunteers who are the real heroes. They really are the real heroes. Most of them have jobs, but after they work their regular, 8-hour job, they get a bite to eat, and then they come out on most nights and patrol those neighborhoods an additional 2 to 3 hours. Sometimes, they end up being out there longer. So to represent those volunteers and the churches and the pastors was quite an honor for me and Pastor Ellis and Elder Cody to go do that. And to receive that award from the highest law enforcement agency in the country, really made you feel like, man, maybe our work is not in vain, and maybe we really are doing a lot of good out here, because there are days when something happens and you throw your hands up in the air and say, wow, it looked like we took 2 steps forward and now we're taking 3 back. But to receive that award, really made everybody feel good that, hey, people are paying attention and maybe we are having a real significant impact.
Well, I'm very hopeful, and Dr. Moore, I think it's going to be significantly important if we're going to see the same kind of effectiveness in some of these other areas. With regard to the Mayor Joe Hogsett's plan. In his public safety plan when he was running, there were 2 things, Peacekeepers Initiative and gang interdiction. Those were 2 areas that he wanted to make sure that he was being effective in. When I went to the State of the City address, the 2nd annual State of the City address on the IUPUI campus, in the beautiful Hine Hall, he didn't mention any kind of information as to how the city's doing with gang interdiction and how the city's doing with the Peacekeepers Initiative. Now, we know it works because he's also included it in his Justice Reform Plan. Do you think that the efforts of 10 Point can help Mayor Joe Hogsett in the future have some effectiveness in those 2 very important areas?
Well, I do. I believe that this initiative can be replicated in neighborhoods all across the city of Indianapolis where we're having a high level of violence. We know it works. We know it's evidence-based. It's in cities all across the country. They have different names for it. But everywhere where this kind of initiative has been implemented, we have seen positive results. And I believe that if we can implement the same strategy and use people who are in those neighborhoods, both churches and community groups and neighborhood associations, we could see the same kind of impact that we have seen in Butler, Tarkington, Crown Hill, and the United Northwest area in neighborhoods across this city where we're having trouble.
I noticed, I watched 10 Point for years.
Yes.
I just have never been, qualified to be a part of that group, I understand. But I watched the transition from moving throughout the streets of Indianapolis to moving to community organizations. Am I on point with that?
Yes, yes.
I watched that, and it seems like when you moved into the area of community and talking with community people, it seems like your whole direction of entering an area has changed.
Yes.
And I think that has always been the issue. You cannot win or fight crime, whether it be 1824, 14 to 24, without having a community to buy in. You cannot enforce law
yes,
without having a community to buy into it. You cannot come with a plan and expect the community to buy into it. You have to come with the community to create the plan so the community can work with you together. And I think that's what I see you've done as you transition from just street work also to organizational work.
Yeah.
Well, that is true. That is true. And we kind of, fell into that because of some, financial issues our organization was having. And we decided, hey, why not involve the neighborhood at a greater level and get the neighborhood to basically police their own neighborhood.
They're the ones that change it.
Yes.
Believe it or not, no matter who comes along with an incentive, it is the people in that neighborhood that change it by the information they bring forward about the neighborhood and the areas in which they live in. And how can you enforce if you do not have a community to buy into it? That's the same way with the job program we work with every summer. We cannot do this without the communities buying into it.
And we'll have to let that be the last word. Thank you, Reverend Harrison, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Always a pleasure. And thank you for joining us. We'll be back after this. Welcome back to Real People, Real Voices. I'm your host, James Jackson.
I'm your co-host, Pastor Wayne Moore.
And I'm your executive producer, Faith McKinney.
Good to see you again.
It's good to be here.
Hi, Faith.
Good to see you, Pastor Moore.
And Real People, Real Voices is sponsored in part by Lee and Fairman, attorneys at law.
Oh yeah, great staff there at Lee and Fairman. Nathaniel Lee has done a lot of work in our city for many of years, and we're glad to have him on board as a sponsor.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And not only him, but there are others who are definitely on their way because Real People, Real Voices demands great sponsorship.
Let me tell you a little about Lee and Fairman, how they helped me. I know that, you might not know, but they might not know either. A few years ago, I donated my kidney. And
I remember that.
Yeah, in order to do something like that, you need a will.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't think that, will. But, they drew up my will for me. It was great, really, really fast service, professional. And I can't wait to go back to do some other things, family planning, not necessarily family planning, but planning ahead.
Yeah.
And that's important.
Yeah, it is. And he has the people right there in his office that can help us do that.
They're wonderful.
And not only that, he's also working with those who are doing Social Security and things of that nature. So we need to get our community to pay more attention to what Lee and Fairman are doing in our city. And
the contact information is right there on the screen for you. Great guest there,
yes.
Reverend Charles Harrison, 10 Point Coalition. Your thoughts?
Well, I truly appreciate the partnership approach that he's taking now with the 10 Point Coalition. You cannot, as Pastor Moore, as you said, you cannot create change within a community without the community buy-in. And, there are other pastors who are also doing things, and Pastor Girton, Pastor Hicks on the Northwest side, Pastor Girton's working on the Northeast side, and I'm helping him with that as well. That's where I live.
People know him as
Pastor G.
Yeah, there we go.
Pastor G. So, just making sure that the community has a buy-in is a big job. And, I commend Reverend Harrison for everything he's done over the years. It's not easy.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Especially when our homicides in Indianapolis over the last 30 plus years, 8 to 12 people every month.
Every month, and it doesn't seem like it's going to slow down. We're about ready to go into summer months, which is high homicide area for the year. Mm-hmm. So we're going to do what we can to combat that along with others in the community.
And we want you to do all you can to help make sure that there's peace on every corner in the city of Indianapolis. Thanks for joining us. Please go to our YouTube channel and subscribe and like us on Facebook. We'll see you next time.